Before we start, maybe just to make sure that everyone is here.
A holy man, a man with connections. But what will he do when God's lovingly created planet comes under attack?
If we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. It's time to take out the trash.
A pontiff fighting for God's creation.
Come on, you holiness.
Tireless. Fearless.
This growth must be stopped. Coal, oil, gas, these are God-given gifts, and they are ours for the taking.
Unstoppable.
Me, Father!
Nature never forgets. If you slap it, it will always slap you back.
He is an easy man to follow, and a hard man to silence. But in this epic battle against climate crisis, we can't let him fight alone. This summer, to save our world, one man,
Come on, Francis.
will risk it all.
How will it be compelled?
Pope Francis in the encyclical.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kaitano Dube. I am a lecturer at Valley University of Technology. I'm currently busy with my PhD, and I'm focusing on the impact of climate change on Southern Africa, specifically looking at the impacts of climate change on the tourism industry. I'm also a book author, one book author with an international publishing house that just came out 2 months ago, and fairly a young researcher with about 2 peer-reviewed journal articles to his name. We're going to talk about climate change, and I think it's even more difficult to talk about climate change having gone through 2 movies that spoke a bit on different issues on climate change. So this is what we're going to look at. The science of climate change: what are greenhouse gases? How do they cause warming? How are human beings affecting the climate? The consequences, adaptation, and mitigation. But for us to be able to effectively do that, we need to look at some of the definitions of some of the issues that we're going to talk about. I think it's a very good departure point. Climate. I think climate is what you expect, in simple, and weather is what you get. Climate is long-term average of individual conditions that we experience every day. Examples are average temperature, average rainfall, humidity, solar radiation, wind if you want. And weather are the atmospheric outlook at a particular place and at a particular time. We are going to talk about issues that have got to do with climate variability. Climate variability, these are variations linked to passage of seasons at different times of the year, e.g. the ENSO phenomena. We're also going to talk about mitigation. Mitigation are actions that we take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. Climate change adaptation, these are adjustments that are made in response to actual or expected climate events or their effects, which either moderate the human-caused or exploit the moderate and the harm that is caused by beneficial opportunities, according to UNFCCC. So maybe to start with, climate change, this is an anthropogenic change in average climate conditions that are driven by human activities, as we have already known. And on the chart, we have got a number of sectors that actually contribute to the greenhouse gases that are responsible for the changes in climate. We've got the energy sector contributing about 1.4%. We've got the industry contributing about 11% on a global scale. We've got the transport, again, 0.39%, the buildings, 12%, and on the other side, we also have the electricity, which electricity generation that is for energy, which contributes a lot to the greenhouse gases. Right, I've got a short video just to demonstrate how carbon dioxide actually lead to the causes global warming. And we know that global warming, this is the increase in temperature due to anthropogenic activities. That is the main driver of climate change, as we have already learned.
So what's causing the modern warming? CO2, carbon dioxide. When we look at the history of the climate, what we find is that whenever CO2 has been high, it's been warm, and whenever CO2 has been low, it's been cold. And we can't explain the size of the temperature changes unless more CO2 makes it warmer. So what does CO2 have to do with temperature? It's simple physics, really. More CO2 makes it warmer through the greenhouse effect. The sun sends energy and heats the Earth sends back energy to space, and the CO2 gets in the way of some of that. That traps some of the heat here at the Earth and keeps us warmer than we would be. Without CO2 in the air, we'd send energy to space really easily. The surface of the Earth would be frozen, and we would be very unhappy, or we wouldn't be here. But as you turn up the CO2, adding more to the atmosphere, it traps more of that heat going up from the Earth, and so the more CO2 makes it warmer. It's simple physics. CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas. Water vapor, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, and others are also greenhouse gases. But CO2 looks like the main driver of the warming that's happening now. We know of no way to avoid the warming effect of CO2. More CO2 makes it warmer as surely as if you drop a pencil in the air, it falls down, not up.
Okay, so that's just some background physics on the climate change. So the major question will be, how is climate change going to affect us? I think by and large, we are aware that climate change is going to adversely affect life as we know it today. And there is a current debate as to whether climate change is a current event that is occurring or it is going to happen in future. And scholars actually argue on this issue. But what we know is that there is a consensus amongst academics that climate change has already started occurring. And we are noticing that through the destruction of coral reefs along the coastal lines, the disturbance of natural ecosystems for both flora and fauna, increased erosion along coastal areas, increased desertification, and reduction in biomass in various geographic regions, imbalances in the ecosystem, and increased incidence of waterborne disease. Climate change in South Africa. Maybe one thing that would be interesting is to say, okay, this is the global outlook. This is what people are saying about the what is going to happen in the world. What then is going to happen in South Africa? Current studies show that increased warming, as a consequence of climate change, we expect that there is going to be generally an increase in temperature. Sea level is rising and is expected to even rise more. Increased aridity in certain parts of the country. Certain parts of the country are going to become more dry. And what does it mean? If we have more dry, someone was talking about Free State as the breadbasket of South Africa. What is then going to happen? Obviously, there is going to be water shortage, and once there's water shortage, there's a reduction in terms of cereal production. And when there's a reduction in cereal production, it drives the supply of food is going to be erratic. And when that happens, food prices are going to go high. And when that happens, it means more hunger. More hunger, I think, to us, it means more demonstrations on the streets, and the cycle goes on. Right, increased incidence of El Nino and La Nina events, and increased evaporation rates, increased incidence and intensity of tropical cyclones, and we know that tropical cyclones are quite catastrophic to human lives and human activities, with evidence showing that there is going to be a lot of money that is going to be lost in terms of businesses and even in terms of infrastructure and houses. Right, I've got a map that actually shows a scenario that is going to happen in terms of South Africa. We have got, like I indicated earlier on, a band of places that is on the west and southern parts of South Africa that are going to become more drier, and we have got certain regions that are going to be wetter. So what does it mean? I think as the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what does it mean for human habitation, for human activities? It means we need then to generate some sort of coping mechanisms for us to be able to survive. Some areas are going to become warmer, and some areas are also going to be what? Wetter, and we have got those two zones indicated. I think I've got, again, a lot of maps here that actually indicate what is going to happen as a consequence of climate change. And as you can see here, I think it might not be clear if you are sitting right at the back, but there is an increase of temperature of 2.25 in the western parts of South Africa, and generally there will be an increase in temperature. It means it's going to become even more uncomfortable. So what does it really mean? It has got implications on aviation, tourism. Aviation, what is going to happen? We know that when temperatures are too high, the cargo actually, studies have indicated that in certain areas, cargo is actually supposed to reduce the weight of the aeroplanes. So if you've got a 200-seater, it might end up carrying maybe around 180 people to actually cater for the temperature that is actually increasing. Rainfall events are also going to be affected. We expect extreme and erratic severe rainfall events. And what is interesting is that the rainfall pattern is going to be grossly distorted. We have got some areas that you have got maybe an area is receiving 500 millimeters of rainfall. That is supposed to be spread across 3 months. That rainfall might actually come in 1 month or in a week. And so we have got farmers that are actually dependent on the natural rain-fed agriculture. What does that mean? It means, again, there are challenges in particular to that. On the ecosystem, we have got areas that have been highlighted. The fynbos, we expect that there will be also a reduction in terms of the area that is covered by fynbos, and some of the animals in Kruger National Park are also under severe threat, and a lot of studies are being carried out to actually ascertain what is going to happen. But there is a high degree of confidence that a lot of species are going to be lost. What does that mean for the tourism industry? What does that mean for the people that are actually employed in the tourism industry? I think it's a very difficult question to answer. Right, and we have got, on cereal production, I spoke about cereal production earlier on. This is the map that actually shows that the red areas show areas that are going to experience a decrease in cereal production, and that's the red areas are about 40% reduction. Right, climate impact on diseases, that is on malaria. We have got areas that are actually affected by malaria, and they are shaded in green. And according to this map, it actually shows that the transmission for malaria will rise from 4 to 6 months. In other words, we are going to have, we certainly need to put in place measures in order to be able to make sure that people that are staying in those areas that are shaded green are actually safe from malaria, and they are able to adapt. Right, so we spoke about mitigation, and I explained what mitigation is. What are some of the things that we can actually do to reduce the impact of climate change? I think there is need of a lot of research that we need to actually conduct, not only in South Africa, but in Africa as a whole, given the fact that we have got very little researchers that are actually focusing on the impact of climate change. So we need to conduct research on green energy and innovation, conduct education and training both to every person in any industry, so that we streamline climate change and it becomes part of our daily life, and everyone is actually conscientized about climate change and how to reduce the impact of climate change. We also need to reduce the use of fossil fuels, the fuels that we use every day, so that we do not continue to actually increase the amount of carbon dioxide that we emit into the atmosphere. More research is needed to understand how it is going to affect South Africa and the extent of the impact. We also need to use what? Renewable energy. And I think earlier on we heard about geoengineering, which is one of the tools that can actually be used to reduce both the amount of carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere, or the amount of greenhouse gases that are actually emitted in the atmosphere. And we have heard about a lot of other things that can be done. Right, need for energy miracles. Think we might also consider some of these. There is a debate. One can actually argue to say, no, nuclear energy is not the best way to go. But if we want to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere, these are some of the things that are being proposed. Solar thermal power stations, solar photovoltaic, wind energy, and carbon capture and storage. And I think a lot has been said about this. In conclusion, let's listen to this.
No challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. – 2014 was the planet's warmest year on record. Now, one year doesn't make a trend, but this does. 14 of the 15 warmest years on record have all fallen in the first 15 years of this century. I've heard some folks try to dodge the evidence by saying they're not scientists, that we don't have enough information to act. Well, I'm not a scientist either. But you know what? I know a lot of really good scientists at NASA and at NOAA and at our major universities. And the best scientists in the world are all telling us that our activities are changing the climate. And if we don't act forcefully, we'll continue to see rising oceans, longer, hotter heat waves, dangerous droughts and floods, and massive disruptions that can trigger greater migration and conflict and hunger around the globe. The Pentagon says that climate change poses immediate risks to our national security. We should act like it. And that's why over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we've set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. And that's why I will not let this Congress endanger the health of our children by turning back the clock on our efforts. I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year, the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got.
Yes, President Obama. The one planet we got. To Africa, what does it present? Does it present an opportunity or a challenge? I think there's a great opportunity for Africa to develop in terms of green technology. We're talking about green jobs. Thousands of jobs can be created through climate change, mitigation, and other technological innovation to make sure that as Africa, we are not as a victim, but a victor of climate change.
So guys, any questions, any comments for Klein? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cheese. Okay. Okay, start from the flank over here. Go for it.
Okay. It's not a comment or a question, but would you please explain the relationship between malaria and climate change in regard to countries in Africa? I don't really get that.
Okay, basically the thing is malaria predominantly found in very hot regions. So as a consequence of climate change, I think I've shown a chart that actually shows that we expect an increased warming. So increased warming means that more places that did not previously have malaria are going to become conducive for malaria, for mosquitoes to actually breed that give rise to malaria.
I'm not sure if I got that right from the previous speaker when he said that what's that, mosquitoes and all that are well adapted to cold and ice, and how is that with this increased?
I think from my personal research, the medical people, that is what they are saying. I think there is always room for debate. It's not for me to say he was wrong because he didn't present compelling evidence to me. But from the studies that I've carried, there is a relationship between an increase in temperature in dengue fever and malaria.
Thank you.
Answer your question?
Maybe just do your own research and then you guys can chat later.
Next question.
Yeah, I just want to ask, why does the carbon dioxide remain in our planet? What stops it from moving to other planets?
Which other planets?
Mars, Venus, other planets in the solar system. Why does it form that
I
thing?
think that's the chemistry part, Dr. Kaum.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you go to other planets?
No, because I can't.
Why can't you? What's stopping you?
It's too far.
What's stopping you going up into space? Gravity. What's the air made of? It's molecules. They're subject to the laws of gravity. Most of the atmosphere is held very low. So it tries to escape because, you know, the gases are going around kinetic theory of gases, but it's always been constantly pulled back down by the force of gravity. But interestingly, there's not very much helium on Earth. It's an inert gas, and it's only got an atomic weight of 2. It's very light. And actually, there's no way to make it. And the Earth is running out. We use it in labs a lot, we use it in hospitals a lot, because basically it's so light, it does escape into space, and gradually all the helium on Earth is disappearing. But yeah, gravity.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. I liked also how you incorporated the videos in your presentation. My question is, with regard to nuclear energy, would it be a viable option for South Africa? Because my theory is, first of all, you need a lot of trained professionals in order to run nuclear power stations and to understand the dynamics of it. And second of all, don't nuclear power stations release radioactive waste, which are very harmful to the environment? So is it a viable option for South Africa?
I think that is up to policymakers, but that is the science of it. What we really know is that, like I said, indicated earlier on, in terms of any method that is being proposed, there are people who are against it. But what we know is that nuclear energy, so far in South Africa, has been doing wonders for us with little problems. And we have got people that are willing to invest in it. The Russians and I think the Chinese, we had them running into the country, I think 2-3 months back. And I think that in terms of human resources, I think it's an African problem. Do we have enough human resources to man those infrastructure? I think we do. What we just need to do sometimes is maybe to align our immigration laws so that they accommodate more professionals. There's no right and wrong answer to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question. Okay.
I would like to first to recognize that you make a very excellent presentation. Because you managed to present various aspects in which climate change is impacting on our planet Earth. So, but my question is, why should we be worried by rising sea level?
Because we have got so many security and tourism installations that are actually located on coastal areas that are going to be affected by rising sea level. So in terms of, you can also look at it from a point of erosion, that it's actually going to encroach into more areas, and an encroachment of seawater into our freshwater resources, which poses a huge challenge in terms of the water that we consume every day. So it's a multifaceted problem that you can look at it from either direction.
And obviously loss of lives, drowning.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, next question. Okay, we'll take you, and then you, and then who else? It's just the two of them, eh? Okay. Go for it, guys.
Yeah, it's actually two quick questions. Firstly, I'd like to, I don't know, you made like a really great presentation. I liked the videos and your slides are clear and informative. I really liked the last video with Obama and all that with the Senate. First of all, I'd like to ask you about the graph that always shows up in all the presentations and movies and all that. So it shows a direct. I wanted to ask you if carbon dioxide does
Trying to find it for you.
No, it's on the video, so you might need to play the video.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I have it. Hang on.
Okay,
so is carbon dioxide a direct contributor of an increase in temperature, or does it indirectly affect the temperature of the planet? Does it directly affect it or indirectly?
I think we go back to the videos and the movies that we have seen. Currently, scientists believe that there is a correlation between an increase in carbon dioxide and an increase in temperature. That is what 99.9% of scientists agree on. I think as alluded
Everyone.
Yeah, as alluded to. There's only, I think, a small percentage of scientists who say no, but that's not yeah.
This one here.
And my last question is, so I read somewhere that over the past 20 years, there's been an increase in aircraft turbulence, and that increase of airline turbulence apparently is caused by climate change. Is that true?
Yes, I was reading, I think, several reports from America that actually alluded to the fact that because of climate, there's an increase in the amount of cloud or extreme weather events that produce heavy precipitation events. And everyone who have been on a flight would agree that it's very rough to actually to actually fly on top of a storm. That's one. The other school of thought is that the climate change, the increase in temperature, is leading to the disturbance of the natural flow of the air streams that we have, which causes actually the turbulence. So that's a bit of part of aviation engineering, but that's the long and short of what I've found out so far.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, at the back.
Yes, great presentation. Very concise. But I'm trying my best. But stand up.
Feline participant.
But I would like to differ with your final regards in terms of these mitigations, like this green technology being a sort of an opportunity for Africa rather than a challenge. I think it's still a challenge. We still have like many underdeveloped places. Like not so long ago, we saw a video whereby the clinic that was operating with the solar system. We saw the difficulties. I think it still remains a challenge. Although it's a great thing that the Americans are finally like committing to this trade, to this focus. In past years, I think they were only like biggest country that didn't sign into the trade. I can't remember if it was the Kyoto Protocol or something, but it was there. It was there. I think it's a great thing that them and the Chinese are finally like committing, provided they've been like the most polluters of the atmosphere for as long as I can remember. But for Africa, I think it still remains a challenge.
Yeah, I think what I precisely said was, for Africa, is it a challenge, is it a problem or a challenge? There are two things that you can do. If something is a problem, most people would like to cry and moan about it. But if you take it as a challenge, you try and find solutions and innovative ways of how you can harness that to the best. And what I said is that it actually presents opportunities for actually to yes, it is a big problem, it is a challenge, but the perception of how you are going to take it is going to determine the destiny for Africa from now going onwards.
Okay, are we good? Any more questions? Any more comments? Okay, thanks, Klein. It was really Okay, so now we got a guest speaker by the name of Suzanne. What's her name again? Menzel. She's a former planeteer as well. She has she did a doctorate at the University of Germany in environmental and ecological economics.
Hi, Suzanne. Sorry.
Yes, so then her topic was economic valuation of the conservation of